My fiance's parents insisted I sign a prenup, saying, our son's wealth must stay in the family. His mother sneered, you'll always be just a guest in his home. They were thrilled when I inherited millions, expecting me to fund their lifestyle. Instead, I smiled, slid the prenup across the table, and said, actually, let's talk about what's really mine. I met Ryan in college. He was one of those guys who seemed to glide through life with ease, good looks, charm, and old money. His parents were the kind of rich that made you question how wealth like that even happened. They had a massive estate in the Hamptons, a vacation home in Aspen, and a penthouse in Manhattan that had never seen a mortgage payment. Ryan was used to that life, but to his credit, he never flaunted it. He paid for dinner without making a big deal of it. He never made me feel like I was beneath him. Despite his privileged upbringing, he had a kind heart. After 5 years together, we got engaged. I was over the moon. I had a good job, I worked hard, and I wasn't struggling, but I wasn't on their level. I didn't think it mattered until I met his parents. I should have known what was coming when Ryan's mother, Victoria, inspected my engagement ring under the light, like she was grading a diamond. At Saks, she said, pursing her lips. I shrugged it off. People like her had a different perspective on wealth, and I wasn't about to let it ruin my moment. But the next conversation was what really set the stage for what was to come. Victoria and Ryan's father, Richard, invited me to lunch at an expensive restaurant. I arrived in my best business casual, while Victoria was dripping in designer from head to toe. No greetings, no pleasantries, just straight to business. We need to talk about the prenup, Victoria announced before the waiter even took our drink order. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? Richard cleared his throat. It's a standard agreement. Our family has worked hard to build what we have, and we need to make sure it stays in the family. I looked at them, then at Ryan, expecting him to jump in. He didn't. Victoria leaned in, her expression almost piteous. It's not personal, dear. You'll always be a guest in his home. It's just a formality. I nearly choked on my water. That moment stayed with me. It wasn't a prenup itself. I would have signed one if Ryan had asked me personally. It was the way they made it clear that no matter what I did, no matter how much I loved their son, I would never be one of them. I signed the prenup without hesitation. It had one interesting clause. Any money or assets I acquired independently would remain mine in full. They thought it was a joke, a formality. After all, what could I possibly bring to the table? And then life happened. 6 months before the wedding, my great-uncle passed away. I barely knew him. He was the black sheep of the family, a quiet man who kept to himself and had no children. Turns out he had invested early in tech startups, had some real estate, and owned a few patents. When the dust settled, I inherited nearly $9 million. I didn't tell Ryan's family. I wanted to see something first. I noticed the shift immediately. The sneers became smiles. The passive-aggressive comments turned into thinly veiled flattery. Victoria invited me to spa days. Richard started calling me dear. It was nauseating. Then, a week before the wedding, they invited me to dinner. Ryan was clueless, smiling as his mother poured me an expensive glass of wine. Richard slid a folder across the table. We were thinking, Victoria began, her voice sugary sweet, that given your recent financial situation, it would only be fair to revise the prenup. I let out a slow breath. Oh, she nodded eagerly. It just makes sense, doesn't it, to ensure that everything stays within the family? You understand? I looked at Ryan. He was avoiding my gaze, staring at his plate. I smiled, took the prenup out of my purse, and slid it across the table, the original one, the one they had insisted I sign. I actually love this agreement, I said. Let's keep things exactly as they are. Silence. Victoria's smile twitched. Sweetheart, that's not really it, I interrupted. This document ensures that what I bring into the marriage remains mine, just as it ensures what Ryan has remains his. It's fair, right? Richard cleared his throat. Well, in light of these developments, we just think that I should pay into the family, I finished for him. That I should be the one protecting the wealth, that I should take care of you the way you assumed Ryan would take care of me. Victoria's eyes darkened. That's not what we're saying, she said. It is, I said simply. And I'm saying no. Ryan finally spoke. Babe, let's just. I stood up. I'm going to say this once. I was willing to marry into a family that never wanted me. I was willing to sign whatever you wanted because I loved your son. Done. But I will not be manipulated. You made this bed, lie in it. I left them sitting there, stunned. The wedding was complicated after that, but I made it clear, the prenup's days were over, or there was no wedding. They were furious, but they had no choice. Ryan and I got married, but something changed. His parents' resentment festered, their entitlement grew. And Ryan, he never quite figured out whose side he was on. That was the beginning of the end. But the real revenge came later. After the wedding, things were tense. Ryan and I moved into a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, something I had purchased myself. His parents, of course, saw this as a direct attack on them. I still remember the day they walked through the house for the first time, looking around like I had dragged them into a landfill. It's charming, Victoria said, her lips so tight they were nearly white. Richard, arms crossed, nodded stiffly. A bit small. I had to stop myself from laughing. It was a $3 million home. But in their world, if it wasn't inherited or didn't have a name attached to it, like the Bradford Estate or Wexley Manor, then it was beneath them. Ryan just shrugged. I like it. I wanted to believe that, but things started shifting between us, subtle at first, then less so. It was little things, Ryan being strangely defensive when I talked about work, making comments about how stressful it must be for me to handle my own finances. Then bigger things, him asking if we should combine accounts, despite the prenup explicitly keeping our finances separate. And then the biggest thing, his parents showing up unannounced to pitch their latest business opportunity. You can click on share and more to see if there is a part 2.